Hi everyone, welcome to Practical Christianity. It's Adiola Akintoye. It's been a while since I've done an episode of Practical Christianity, and that's because I've been traveling. Back to back, and most of the time my travel flight falls on a Sunday, and it's not been difficult. It's not been easy to actually, schedule an episode, and I've tried not to, make it a recorded delivery. So I'm currently settled in Nigeria. I'm in Nigeria for Easter, and so I'm logging in from there. It's very hot, but we thank the Lord for His mercies. So in my recent travel, I've noticed that in every country that I've been to, and I've been to at least 5 recently, there is a similar theme in those countries, which is escalating cost of living everywhere. It's not, I know in Nigeria, there's a lot of complaints as well about the cost of living, but it's everywhere. Even in the UK where I live, even in Switzerland where I work, everywhere there is escalating cost of living. And I'm sure the economists can analyze it as to why that is, but I'll leave it to them. Many are struggling to put food on the table, roof over their head, and to go about their daily living. Really, it's a struggle for so many. And it's also quite interesting when we look at the what's going on in the world, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting desperately poorer. Unfortunately, the most impacted are usually children, women, widows, elderly, and disabled people. And this is very disheartening. And sometimes it's easy to think, oh, it's not my problem. I see all these things happening in my community, but it's far away from me. It's not, it's got nothing to do with me. As a Christian, we look up to Jehovah God for our daily living. So we trust Him, we pray to Him to answer our prayers, and we trust Him to answer our prayers. And we also have hope as well in Him that our prayers will be answered. And because as Jesus Christ prayed to the Father, give us our daily bread, and we have that belief. And so many people have been sharing testimonies of how their need has been met by God, when they're not expecting it, things, God just make provisions. Hallelujah. You know what, for people that are praying, God uses people. Even those that have, shared testimony, God uses people. So when we think, oh, this problem is so far from me, I'm okay, it's nothing to do with me, God might want to use you and me. And it's very important that we also know the art of God as well. Throughout scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, we see God talking to the Israelites about looking after the poor, the widows, the orphan, and the foreigners in their midst. That there will be, the poor will always be among them, but they should look after the poor. And at this particular season in my life, many years ago, I was inspired by the passage, James chapter 1 verse 27, that says, pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress, and refusing to let the world corrupt you. And as I study the Bible and study, and get to understand the heart of God, that as a Christian, there is this responsibility that the Lord has given us as well to look after the poor and needy in our communities. Those that are not able, to look after themselves. We have the responsibility to look after them. And Apostle James, tells us about faith, dead faith, which is the title of this episode, dead faith. He said in James chapter 2, 14-17 that what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or a sister who has no food or clothing, and you say goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. And as I just reflect on this passage, reflect on what's going on in the world, I feel that this is an opportunity for Christians, we Christians, to actually demonstrate loving our neighbors. It's an opportunity to be able to take care of those that are in need, those that need more than we do. Yes, there might be need to sacrifice. So rather than spending some money on yourself, you are using that money to feed somebody, you are using that money to clothe somebody. Rather than having 3 meals, full meals a day, you might have 2 and donate 1 meal to somebody that needs it. What better way to showcase the love of Christ, who died? He gave his life. He gave his life so that you and I might live and have a relationship with the Father. So, this is not the time to want to have more when there's somebody in your sphere of influence needing one. You have more. Why not give? This is an opportunity to show care, to the community as well. I believe that, this is not the time for the church to be, asking people to donate money to build, buildings, stones that don't need to eat, that don't need to clothe, don't need to be fed, when, there are brothers and sisters, there are people, especially widows, orphans in our community. A few weeks ago, I was called by a 10-year-old girl, crying, saying she, there's nothing in the house to eat, and she can't even go to school. Her mother has not been paid for months, even though she's working, but they've not paid salaries, and I was really, really moved with compassion, because how can, a 10-year-old, a fatherless child, not having food to eat, and living in a community where, there's nobody to go, to and ask for help. This is an opportunity for us, even if we're not a Christian, we can help those that are in need. There's so many things. Even in the UK, for example, they've got food banks. There's so many people that are living in the streets. People are using this food bank. You can contribute to the food bank. You can buy some provisions and contribute to your nearest food bank. And also, if you come from a community like I do from Nigeria, where we know that, there's so much, suffering of the popular masses. I was listening to the news today, and they were talking about 2 university students that were trampled to death because they were, collecting government palliatives, but they were rushing, climbing on each other, to collect this bag of rice. Why? Because they are suffering. So they were rushing and they were stampeded, to death. That is so, so sad. And so if, as individuals, we can reach out to, contribute to organizations that support, whether it's a food bank, whether, people that gives to orphanages or widows, something, give back something, especially during this season where we are remembering the death, the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made, how he gave his life, for you and us and myself. So let's give back. And if you are somebody that, currently you are struggling financially, you are struggling, because you are finding it difficult to, to put food on the table, you are finding it difficult in one way or the other. One, God is the provider. God is the provider, and I would also, suggest that we don't give up. We don't give up hope. We continue to pray. We don't give up hope. God has a way of sending people to help. There's so many testimonies I've heard where, people have nothing to eat, and suddenly there will be a knock on the door with, somebody there saying they've been led to bring, a pot of food. They've been led to provide, ingredients, so many, because it's God that sends people to help. It's God that, will help you in your distress. Don't give up hope, don't give up praying. And I will also suggest that, for anyone that is being touched, to really reach out. Do it through friends, do it through family. I believe that God lays in people's hearts wood to help. Just like about 15 years ago, when God laid it in my heart to start We Can Foundation, and I was given very clear, mandate to support widows and orphans. And the support of these people is in Nigeria. Because, personally for me, I believe that God put me in, did not make a mistake when he gave me to Nigerian parents or parents that live, in this part of the world. He entrusted me into their hand. And so there's a role for me to play in my country of birth first. And there's a role, of course, for me to play in the country where I am abiding. So there's a role to play as well. But God will open our eyes to exactly who He's sending us to and what He's sending us for. So for me, it was to support widows and orphans in Nigerian widows and orphans. There are thousands and millions of widows who have been left struggling because of the patriarchal, context, because of the cultural and traditional, ways in Nigeria where, when, husband dies, the family of the husband comes, take everything, and the widows struggle to survive in many cases, and the impact of their circumstances is on their children. And so we focus on widows with younger children. Younger children, they need help, they need support. And so my own ministry is to support these widows, and we do it one widow at a time, or a few widows at a time. I believe that, God sends us to specific people. Somebody was, saying sometime, that even during Jesus's time, it was not every sick, every, widow, everyone that needed help that was helped during his time. There were some that the disciples, helped as well. So God send us to specific people. What would be sad is, if we're not helping our fellow human. And the human spirit is very strong. Whenever there's a disaster, for example, earthquake in Syria, you see communities stand up and support each other. Whenever there's any flooding, you see people stand up to support each other. And you also see people, even in the midst of conflicts, in the midst of war, they're trying, they go about their daily lives. They try to make the best of their circumstances. I've seen, people just, even as the siren, drone siren to warn people that there's a drone coming, you see people still, living their life. So the human spirit is very, very strong. And we have the capability, we have the capability to get through every circumstances, every situation, with that hope. And so, what would be excellent, in one's life is to be able to touch, to be able to help somebody. So even as I know this Easter period is a period when, we Christians, we use it as the opportunity to talk about Jesus, to talk about, the sacrifice that Jesus has